A rookie cop named Jessica is assigned to work the final night of a decommissioned police station. The station has far more significance than she understands, but even so, the fact that her late father worked in the same precinct tells us that she's willing and eager to experience at least one night in this building, as she hopes to learn more about the man that he was prior to his death. This is the premise to both the 2014 movie Last Shift, as well as the 2023 reimagining titled Malum. While they share most of the large story beats, there are a few differences that I want to discuss in this comparison. But be warned, I will be discussing the entire story, so there will be spoilers ahead. Also, these videos are a lot of work to make, so don't forget to like and subscribe. Malum opens with shots of the city, showing us crazy cult members running amok in the streets, and immediately giving us one of the biggest differences in these two films. We see Jessica's father shortly after he killed the cult leader, a man named John Malum. He was able to save a few of the hostages that the leader was holding, but overall, he seems to see his job as mostly failed due to losing most of the hostages as well as not being able to take Malum in alive. He sits in some kind of trance and, seemingly out of nowhere, he goes postal, shooting his fellow police officers before turning the gun on himself and taking his own life. We cut to a year later where we see Jessica and her mother Diane. Diane took the death very poorly and has retreated into alcoholism, and Jessica's want to become a cop like her father has driven a wedge between them. Then, we cut to the evening where Jessica begins her first shift and the last shift of the now decommissioned police station. This is where the movie Last Shift actually begins, skipping the views of the city, the knowledge of the cult, the death of Jessica's father, and instead giving us a cold and isolated open as she enters the police station. The differences in these openings changed the feeling of the movies incredibly. In Last Shift, some odd things begin to happen, and it's a constant tease as to whether or not these oddities are real. Jessica notices lockers opening on their own, receives phone calls from possible hostages, and slowly pieces together the truth of the cult members that ritualistically took their own lives inside of the station. But while similar things happen in Malum, it's easy to chop them up as cult activity, giving us obvious knowledge that Jessica isn't going crazy and that these events are due to this omnipresent cult. It takes the guessing away and allows for an immediate conclusion to what is happening, and, while it isn't terrible, it's not nearly as effective or intense as it was in Last Shift. Continuing with the story of both films, Jessica finds a homeless man inside the station, and when he refuses to leave, she has no choice but to put him into holding, even though her sergeant told her not to enter the holding area. She puts the man inside, but when she does, the door closes and locks her inside.
Excuse me, sir. Do you happen to talk about our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ?
The power goes out and clumsy Jessica drops her flashlight. Someone picks the light up and shines it in her face, and, assuming it's the homeless man, Jessica asks for the light back. However, the light drifts to the corner and we see the homeless man is there, meaning that someone else is holding the light. Jessica freaks out and backs away through the now open door. In Malum, Jessica calls for a dispatch team to come pick up the homeless man, and she finds a pig at the front door with the cult symbol drawn on its back. While in Last Shift, Jessica shakes off the spook as likely nerves before she receives a phone call from the biohazard cleanup crew, saying that they'll be by later than they expected but promising that they'll be there by 4 a.m. She gets another call from an apparent hostage and is able to take down her name before the line goes dead. Meanwhile, in Malum, Jessica finds a USB drive and searches through a file titled Malum. She finds cultist interviews and is seemingly pulled inside of them. The cultists turn and address her by name before it cuts to her father interrogating John Malum sometime before his death. During the interrogation, her father abruptly stands and exits the room, seemingly going after something, and when Jessica finds the footage from his body cam, she sees the reflection of a strange being in the window's reflection. The footage then changes again to the cult, all surrounding a baby. Malum says that this baby will bring the rebirth of their lord, before calling it Jessica and handing it to a much younger Diane. After seeing this, Jessica calls her mother and tells her where she is and asks her what's going on. Both films then introduce us to a prostitute named Marigold. In Last Shift, she's the expositional character that fills us in on most of what the cult is about. She tells Jessica that the cult members hanged themselves in their cells and that she was there and heard the screams. While in Malum, she begins to explain things but suddenly stops and stares at the window. She then pleads to something and says that she won't say anything more, and when Jessica tries to get more answers, she leaves. Last shift has a fellow police officer then show up at the front door to check up on Jessica. This man is Officer Price, and he says that he was her father's partner. In this movie, Jessica's father was a hero. He and Officer Price were the first officers to arrive at the Colt's barn, and were able to rescue 3 hostages before her father was shot and killed. It was due to his effort that the cult leader, in this film a man named John Payman, was arrested and sent to the station. Price does say that 2 officers, including Jessica's father, were killed in the rescue and arrest, but Jessica is just happy to have learned more about who her father was. She asks Price to stay, and he says that he wishes he could, but unfortunately, that's impossible. He turns to leave, and we see a large bullet hole in the back of his head, showing us that Officer Price was the second casualty in the arrest, and once he leaves Jessica's sight, the man disappears. In Malum, the dispatch team finally arrives to take the homeless man to a more permanent holding cell. The officers are named Hudson and Price, and when Price turns around, his head is whole and unshot, so I guess that plot point has changed in this film. Only I'm lying, because after showing Jessica where the shotgun that her father used to kill the other officers is located, he turns and his face is little more than a bloody pulp. In both films, the homeless man then begins to scream, and Jessica runs to help. The man is pleading to be let out, and when he moves, Jessica sees the cultists, or Officer Hudson, behind the man, threatening his life. She opens the holding cell, and in Last Shift she finds him hanged in the same way that the cult members went out.
This is your brain on drugs.
While in Malum, the man runs out and heads to the front door. But he stops when he hears his daughter call out to him. He goes inside of a room and finds the pig that Jessica found earlier, and we learn that the man's daughter was fed to this very pig after she was killed by the cultists. The man is seen hobbling down the hallway a bit later, but he's missing his foot and he collapses, dead, when Jessica runs to help. Her mother then arrives and they argue before Jessica hears something and tells her mother to stay there while she investigates. Things then escalate rapidly, and this is where the films change significantly. Last Shift has Jessica get knocked out, and when she comes to, her gun is missing. She finds that a cult member broke into the station and stole her weapon. The cult member then praises the second coming of her god before taking the pistol and shooting herself. Jessica hears more cultists enter the station and picks up her pistol to defend herself. We see cultists dart through the hallways, and Jessica is able to take them out one by one. She injured the final cultist, but when she asks him what their plan is, the man raises his gun, forcing Jessica to shoot him. A shot then rings out from behind her, and Jessica looks down to realize that she's been shot in the chest. She looks to her shooter and sees her commanding officer. When she looks over to the cultist's body, we see that it was never a cultist at all, and was actually one of the biohazard cleaning crew, and that every cultist she saw was actually that team. The movie ends with Jessica humming the song of the cultists, leaving us to wonder if the ritual was completed, or if Jessica just lost her mind. Really ambiguous, right? Well, Malum chose to do something different. Jessica runs through the station, chased by dozens of cult members. She's cornered in the firing range, shooting who she can until she runs out of ammo. Malum then steps from the shadows and tells her that she is special and chosen, just like he was when he was an infant, and that she will be the perfect vessel. Then, a being steps from behind the cultists. The satanic god approaches Jessica before his face rips off and attaches itself to her. She runs but can hear the cultists and the strange god chanting and cheering from behind her. But one last satanic being stands in her way. She shoots the creature in the stomach, but as it falls, she realizes that she was hallucinating and that this being is actually her mother. Her mother falls and dies, and Jessica falls to her knees. The cult members then appear behind her and begin to cheer and clap and laugh. The deity then steps near Jessica and whispers something in her ear. Jessica's sobs turn to maniacal laughter. She says that it is now her duty to serve her master and king, and she takes her own life. We see the cultists then drag her corpse away and place it upon a throne that sits next to that god. Her body jumps to life, and that is where this movie ends. While both of these films are decent, I think that Last Shift is the better of the two, and it's all due to its ability to capture suspense. Last Shift never showed its hand entirely. It added mystery with each clue, questions with each answer, and allowed the story to stay ambiguous and uncertain. The want for resolution allowed the scares to build, and the mounting unease to topple and leave one final question. Is Jessica crazy? Malum's willingness to show the cult and delve into its backstory left too many questions answered, taking away from the suspense by showing and directing us to the conclusion that it wanted us to find. It was still fun and filled with scares, and I thought the deity was incredible and haunting, but where Last Shift will stay in my mind and resonate, Malum won't. It's done, concluded, and it gave away its secrets. This kind of video was new for me, so let me know what you thought, and let me know if you'd like to see more comparison videos in the future. And if you enjoyed, then be sure to like and subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye-bye!